Hey guys, welcome to Make Your Remarkable, a brand new podcast brought to you by Oconee State Bank. I'm your host, JT Tomlin, and on this podcast, we're going to be talking all things leadership, entrepreneurship, and personal development. Our goal is to ignite purpose and inspire passion in our listeners by asking them the question, how will you make your remarkable? We'll be interviewing local legends, business owners, and leaders within our communities and asking them about their road to success. Like, what kind of steps did they take to get where they are now? What does it mean to be a leader? And how can I lead my team? As well as what kind of mark they've made and what kind of mark they hope to leave in the future. This is going to be an amazing podcast, and we cannot wait for you to listen to it. So make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and follow us on social media at Oconee State Bank for more information. Today, we're joined by former UGA football coach, Mark Richt. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Doing great.
Doing awesome. Yeah, doing terrific.
Good. So we wanted to ask you a couple questions about how you've made your mark. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, the bottom line is I used to play football, and then you get to the point where somebody tells you can't play anymore, you get cut. I got cut from a couple of NFL teams, and so I was like, what am I going to do now? Tried a few things, sales. I tried life insurance. I was valeting cars. I was actually even a bartender before I started to coach. But
really,
I became a coach back in 1985 as a graduate assistant at Florida State, and then kind of worked my way up the ranks from there.
Coach, you were sharing with me earlier, JT grew up a football fan, Georgia fan. He's 20 years old, but he told me a little funny story before we got started today about some workers at your house.
Yeah, well, JT, you were saying JT grew up hearing Coach Richt's name, and it was always in a good way at his house. And I was like, that's not always the case. I was thinking, it made me think about something Coach Bowden had said. As I worked for him at Florida State, we'd always have these hideaway meetings where we would talk about philosophy, and the first thing he talked about was loyalty, but the second thing he talked about was criticism. He said, if you can't handle criticism, get out of coaching, because the bottom line is if you're in a leadership position, you're going to get it. And he said, most criticism is aimed at the position, not the person. He goes, it'll feel personal.
Yeah.
They'll try to make it personal, but the reality is they're aiming it at the position that you hold. And so a great example of that was when we moved back to Athens, we decided to put an outdoor kitchen in our backyard, and the brick to the kitchen was going to match the house. So we needed some guys to lay brick, obviously. So a 3-man crew came to the house. 2 guys were laying the brick and 1 guy was mixing the mortar. So one morning I got up and checked out the guys laying the brick in the back, and then the guy mixing the mortar was on the other side of the garage. I went over to say hello to him to see how things were going. Then at lunchtime, went back to see how the progress was going, and all 3 of them ended up in the same spot out in the back. And the guys that were laying bricks said, hey, Coach, I hope you've got a great sense of humor. I go, why is that? He said, well, Jim over there mixing that mortar, when you went over to say hello to him, as soon as you left, he got on the phone and called his wife. He was all excited that Coach Richt stopped by and said hello, and he was talking to his wife about that. And she said, well, did you call him an idiot? And he said to his wife, why would I do that? She said, well, that's what you've been screaming at the television for the last 15 years. So they definitely is a prime example of when I was in the position. He wasn't too happy with me.
Yeah.
But when I wasn't in the position anymore, he was excited to hear from me.
I just remember growing up, we had like this big picture of all of the different Uggas and like their names. And then right next to it, it was like a signed picture of you. And I remember.
I got to hang out with the Uggas. That's a big deal.
It was cool. It was really awesome.
Well, congratulations on your induction into the College Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that was really humbling to us, Catherine and I. It's a team thing for sure. And when we got the package in the mail on the day of the national championship, when they announced the class for 23, we opened the box together and we hugged and we cried and we laughed and it got kind of stupid for a minute, but it means a lot to us for sure.
That's a big deal. Players that I talked to, many didn't make it to the NFL. Some may have gone to the NFL for a period of time, but that ends, right? And so what really matters to them, particularly now as they've matured, many of them is like, wow, the impact, the way coach shaped my life, not just for football, but for where I am today as a human being.
In football, I mean, it's not a lasting thing. It's a fleeting moment. I mean, it's great. It's an amazing thing.
The principles that you learn from football last a lifetime.
Exactly.
But being able to play it obviously doesn't last forever.
Exactly. And so your inspiration, the way that you've taught these guys in their career as football players is, like you talked about, making a lasting mark on them. I mean, you're creating an eternal mark on these guys by talking about your faith and being there as a coach who's inspiring them to be better men.
That's what you hope.
Players.
The other thing too is, I couldn't connect with every guy. I mean, you got 125 guys on your team at a time. And, one man can't connect with everybody just right. But that's why you try to hire a very diverse staff to handle the very diverse team that you have. And I have certain strengths that I think I was smart enough to know what I was able to and what things I was not able to do. And so you hire people that can, take the place of you, so to speak, when it comes to where you're maybe not too strong at, or maybe your personality doesn't jive with this kid. Mm-hmm. So it's very important to have people around you that are like-minded, but are different than you, because those players are all different.
I couldn't agree with that more. As a leader of the bank here, thank goodness for good people. Right. I mean, I think of our entire bank and our marketing team, and JT over here. I mean, there's no way I could pull something like this off the way he does. And I have my strengths, and you kind of rely on your team to have theirs. I think about making your mark, and that's what the show that JT hosts is all about, is how do you make you remarkable, but how do you impact the lives of people? And that includes family members, obviously.
Right.
And take just a minute and tell us about your family. I know your wife, Catherine, you have your son, John. Just give us a little.
Well, I married Catherine in 1987, I think. She's not here to change it. So if I say with conviction, it's true. But we're 35 years into our marriage, and had John and David biologically, so to speak. And then we adopted Zach and Anya from Ukraine in 1999. Just really our last season at Florida State was the first season that we had Zach and Anya. And then the very next year ended up at the University of Georgia. But, John and Anna have 3 children, Jade and Zoe and Champ. And, grandchildren certainly do move the bar when it comes to who you like the most.
I've met many of your family members. I know John and all that he's doing over at D1. We want to give them a plug before we go off here today. Sure. But you think about the demands of a head coaching job at any level, but particularly at the collegiate level, particularly in an SEC situation. And having a family and the hours that you have to spend at work, but then balancing that with family time with kids, making events, making, football games with your own kids, whatever it may be. How did you navigate that?
One thing, I was very blessed. I mentioned Coach Bowden before, but when I worked at Florida State for him for 15 seasons, he would talk to the staff and ask us, when are you going to see your kids? He didn't mean like Thursday night after practice once a week. He meant every single day, I want you to see your children. We're either going to get up at the crack of dawn and leave early. You can put them to bed, have dinner, put them to bed, or we're going to start a little later in the morning and allow you to have your kids for breakfast to take them to school. And we chose to start our staff meetings around 8:30 in the morning. But that allowed us to, as a staff, to, like for me in particular, we'd wake up, we'd have breakfast together, we'd have a little family devotion, everybody piled up in the car, I'd take them to class, might do spelling words on the way or whatever it was. But every single day, my kids got to see Dad, even in the season. Matter of fact, the season was more reliable as far as our time than it was off season, because sometimes recruiting, you'd be out of town, things of that nature. The other thing that I learned from some kind of book I read or seminar I watched, I can't remember where I learned it, but there was someone who said, as you are leaving your house, find a landmark on the road that once you cross that landmark, and for me, it was the loop 10, coming into town. Once I passed the loop, my focus became football and my job. But on the way home, when you cross that street, that loop, that landmark, you start focusing on family. So it's one thing to be physically at home, but mentally somewhere else. So the goal was to, when I was home, I was there mentally and spiritually and physically.
That's huge.
Yeah. And so, and the other thing too is, my wife, Catherine, she understood that I had to work. She understood I had to recruit. She understood the hours, but she knew there was things that I had to do to get the job done. But she also knew when my time was free where I wanted to be. I wanted to be with them. People ask me what my hobby was. I never had a hobby. And I quit golfing when John was 2 because I couldn't take 5 hours of free time and not be with family. I wanted to be with the family. So I tell people my family was my hobby. And we tried so hard. Like a lot of head coaches, I think, kind of not hide, but they try to stay out of the public eye because it could be a little crazy sometimes. But for us, I wanted to go to as many practices as I could. I wanted to go to as many Little League baseball games as I could. I wanted our lives to be as normal as possible. And I told Catherine, I don't expect you to be the first lady of Georgia football. Don't feel that pressure to do that. You be mom, to these kids. And,
wow.
So that's kind of how we tried to approach it. And Athens, Georgia really allowed us to do that.
JT, you talk about, the show here being all things leadership. And man, what a lesson for leaders who may be watching and listening to take back, because I think so many of them struggle with this whole work-life integration, work-life balance issue. And those are just some great takeaways I picked up right there.
Well, it takes a leader, like Coach Bowden, to say, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, most staffs get there at 6 a.m. and leave at midnight.
Yeah.
There is no time.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing Coach Bowden did too is if your family was in the building, the football office, they could come visit Dad for 5 minutes or have lunch together. Or, we did things like that before the kids went to school. Yeah. But Coach Bowden allowed that, where a lot of coaches are like, this is a work environment. We don't want a bunch of kids running around and all that kind of thing. And Coach embraced that. He wanted.
Yeah.
Well, and real quick, I want to talk a little bit more about Coach Bowden, because I know he was a big mentor for you, correct?
Sure.
I want to hear, because we've talked about Make You Remarkable. How did you see Coach Bowden make his mark, and what kind of mark did he make on you?
Well, a lot of coaches talk about, faith, family, and football as far as priorities, and not everybody lives it out quite that way. But Coach Bowden did. His faith meant so much to him and his family, and as I mentioned, our families too, as a staff. And then, of course, football was highly important to him. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time, won a couple of national championships and all that good stuff. But Coach also led me to Christ in 1986 as a young graduate assistant coach after the death of Pablo Lopez, one of our offensive linemen. And he was talking to the team after the Sunday after it happened, I think on a Saturday night. And he basically said, Pablo used to sit in that chair right there, and he's gone. He goes, I don't know where he's going to spend eternity. And he said, if that was you instead of Pablo, do you know where you'd spend eternity? And he was talking to the team, but I was in the back of the room as a young assistant coach. And I thought about where I'd be if it had been me the day before, and I'd have been in a bad place. So I knocked on his door the next day, and he said, come on in, buddy. And he calls you buddy when he forgets your name. And I said, it's Mark. Anyway, I said, Coach, I know you're talking to the players, but I need Jesus. And so I prayed to receive Christ, and that by far was the most important moment in my life and changed my life for all of my life and all of eternity.
It's interesting that I was listening to you talk about something about that the other day, and hearing your story, it's really cool because you hear how Coach Bowden made a mark on you,
right? And
then that mark that he made on you allowed you to make a mark on your team. And so how did the mark that he made on you allow you to change really the lives of your teammates, or your, not teammates, your team?
Our team, yeah. The bottom line for me is once I became a believer, I had a new goal. Everybody wants to set goals, right? Well, my goal was try to live a life that God would be pleased with, period. You know, I was kind of like, God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just lead me, you know. And so I think if your goal is to please God, and God sees everything, that's the highest accountability you can have. We still, even as believers, our spirit and soul are made perfect, but our behavior still lags behind because we still live in this flesh. I've got these stupid things in my brain that still won't go away, you know. But the bottom line is, once we become believers, you know, it changes everything. So my behavior over time became more Christ-like, I hope. And so, like, when people say, well, how do you discipline, or how do you teach, or how do you this? I mean, everything goes back to, would God be pleased with how I'm doing a certain thing? And that's kind of where, hopefully, the blessings came to the players.
Coach Bowden, I'm sure, had someone in his life, and then Coach Bowden made a mark on Coach Richt and many others. And then Coach Richt, you know, has made a mark on a player who's had an impact on many others. And so it's just, it compounds over time, like multiplication. And that's really cool. So today, Coach, I guess you're doing, you're still working in college football as an analyst, right, and working as on set, I guess, predominantly with the ACC.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit. How's that experience been?
Right. You know, when you retire from coaching, you don't retire from life. I did retire from coaching, and I always say you can only watch so much Game Show Network, you know what I mean? So I got a little bored after a couple of months, and had an opportunity. The ACC was going to start their own network, and the ACC network started in 2019, I believe it was. And so I got interviewed for that process, or that ability to be a studio analyst. So a studio analyst, we preview the games, we talk at halftime, and we talk post-game. We don't call the game at a stadium. So that's what a studio analyst is. And I've enjoyed that very much. You know, found a lot of teamwork. Yeah. Work with young people. Everybody's about half my age on set, and they keep me young. But it's been a lot of fun to do that.
I've often wondered, you know, watching, you know, College Game Day, watching some of the ACC network, et cetera, CBS, you know, even the commentators, but even the analysts. How much time is spent in preparation? I mean, you know the game, obviously, right, but the players, the positions, I mean, is that an intense process to
be honest with you, if you were to call a game, you got to know every player's name, all the pronunciation. You need to know the coordinators. You need to know the scheme. You need to know, you got to really, it's intensive study. If you're a studio analyst, our pregame show is very calculated. We'll have a production meeting, and we'll know every block of time what we're going to cover, so you know what you're going to talk about before you talk about it. And then at halftime and post game, you're basically discussing what you saw. So you can't really prep for that. You got to wait to see it and then make comment on it. So a studio analyst doesn't have as much prep work as somebody who's calling a game. And so year one, I was studying my brains out. But you got a host and 3 guys on stage with you.
Yeah.
And you might get 1 or 2 40-second comments.
Yeah.
For each subject, so to speak. So I found out I over-prepared early on. And part of my job is to tell stories about back in the day and say stupid stuff when it hits my brain. But we have a good time.
So I will move on here with some more Make Your Mark questions. But I got to ask this. 2023, all of college football and then ACC specifically, both. How do you see things shaping up this next year? If you had to make a prediction today of who the top 3 or 4 teams are, I guess we could all take some guesses. But
well, yeah, I'd say Georgia would be number 1. Alabama's in the mix. And then, from the ACC, it's been Clemson for so long, and it could very well be Clemson again. But the one team that's rising, I think, quickly, well, actually, it didn't happen quickly. It took a good little bit of time. But Coach Norvell over there at Florida State has put together a really solid team, and they had no kids opted out. The quarterback came back. Jordan Travis, in my opinion, was the most improved player in the ACC and maybe in the country last season, and now he's a seasoned veteran leader for that team. And because he stayed, I think a lot of his teammates chose to stay. And so I think Florida State is ripe to win the ACC and possibly get into the college football playoff.
Yeah, big deal. We've come a long way.
So you released your book recently, right? It was last year?
Yes, something like that.
Something like that. What do you want people to know about Make the Call? It's all about making the call in your life. And
making the call is a play on words. There's a lot of calls that got to be made as a coach, obviously. If you're calling plays every 40 seconds, you got to make a call. But it's making the calls about making decisions. It could be football decisions. It could be life decisions. And that's kind of what the book's about. And truthfully, it's an evangelistic tool disguised as a football book.
Yeah.
So, if you know somebody who loves football, but you're not sure they love the Lord, that's a good read for them.
And then there's a devotional that comes alongside of that. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a 40-day devotional. I think it's 40 days. And it can be broken down to 5 days a week for 8 weeks, or just you can read it through individually. But it has a lot of the stories from the book that relate to the study.
Yeah. And we talk about making your mark. That's a great way to make your mark. You've got, obviously your entire career, and then in your retirement, your book release and your speeches that you make, being a speaker. And it's incredible. You've made an incredible mark, especially on Athens, but really over the nation.
It was sharing with me this morning his lineup for today. It's like, oh, wow, it's incredible.
Staying too busy.
The opportunities he has.
I was saying, I'm not as busy as I used to be, coaching, but I'm busier than I thought I'd be in retirement.
So talking about making a mark, I know John, your son, and Fred Munzenmeyer, a former player at UGA, and I know yourself, you guys got D1, I guess it's
D1 Sports Performance Gym.
Okay, all right. So which is I've been by there. Great gym, really well done. Talk a little bit about D1, what it does for those who may be looking for a gym, but also kind of how it's making its mark in the lives of people.
Well, D1 is a little bit different kind of gym. A lot of gyms you go in and you get your workout and you leave. Type thing. This one, they have classes that, so it's team training. Everything they do is in the form of how a D1 team would train. Will Bartholomew, a former fullback at Tennessee, lives in the Nashville area, and when he was done playing pro ball, he was looking for a gym to work out at, but every gym he went to, he was missing the camaraderie of teammates to train with a teammate. So that's how he developed the term D1 for the name of the gyms, and that's what we've brought to Athens, Georgia. But it's been very, very highly successful. Another thing about my son John, while we're on the subject, he's been coaching quarterbacks at Prince Avenue Christian School, and this last year in particular was his first year as the core offensive coordinator and play caller, and they went undefeated. Won the state championship this year. So
you think head coaching may be in his career somewhere?
Well, probably so.
Yeah. He's
coached a little bit with the Buffalo Bills. He's coached with me at Georgia and Miami a little bit. But I think he likes the life as a high school coach.
Yeah.
Because he can see his family a lot more than a college coach can.
Yeah, not quite in the same spotlight either, I guess.
Yeah, well, we were talking about it. It was funny because the position that he was in is similar to the position that one of the guys in Facing the Giants was in, and you were in Facing the Giants.
Right.
And so I went back and watched the whole scene that you were in, and the whole speech that you were given in the scene, I was like thinking about it, and it crossed my mind that your son was in a similar position as the coach.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that experience being on Facing the Giants.
Right. When I went to Georgia, I was at a Bulldog Club, and Alex Kendrick, one of the Kendrick brothers in Albany, Georgia, wanted to reach people for Christ, and they felt like people would love movies. People love to go to the movie theater. So they wanted to use that outlet to reach people for Christ. And they had a movie called Flywheel about a used car salesman.
I've seen that movie.
Yeah, it's the corniest movie. Yeah.
It really is.
But it's awesome. And so he said, watch this if you like it. We're going to do a football version of it. And it was just a small cameo part for me. I was the head coach of the head coach. It was going to the state championship game. But I flew into Albany one day. We shot a bunch of video for half a day. They flew me back home, and about 2 years later, the movie came out. And the funny thing, about you mentioning it, is I just got back from Hawaii coaching the Polynesian Bowl, which is a high school all-star game in Hawaii. And two people came to me at this event we were at, separate guys. They came up to me and said, "You're the guy on Facing the Giants." He said, that's my kid's favorite movie. Like, two coaches said that. like, wow, that was pretty funny. But the other thing was there was a team chaplain for University of Hawaii athletics. He came to me and he said, "We played a copy of your testimony a couple years ago." He said, "Coach, I want you to know 11 kids came to Christ."
Wow.
I was like, it's out in Hawaii.
Wow.
So you just never know what God's going to do.
If I remember, it's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but if I remember, it was profound because they were in a situation where they had to make a decision on fourth down, and you said you got to go for it. Yes. I believe is what you said. And I'm like, yeah, I remember watching that.
Yeah, they had me up in the stands going, go for it.
Yeah. So
like the coach could actually hear me on the side. But it was fun.
That was really good. I have to tell one funny story.
Yeah.
That Coach Richt may or may not know this, but I won't mention the name, but there was a police chief here who was the University of Georgia police chief, and I think there was typically, Coach Richt, if I remember, you'd drop the team off at the dog walk, and then you would go on around with the state patrol. But there was a particular time that he walked with the team through the dog walk.
Well, for me, just real quick, first dog walk of the year, I walk with the team.
All right, that's what it was. All right,
and the rest of the season, I
that's what it was. So it was the first game of the season. Everybody's showing up. State Patrol pulls up. The buses pull up behind him. State Patrol gets out of the car to walk with Coach Richt through the dog walk. Leaves the car there, and the bus is right behind the car. and there's nobody to move the car. So everybody's coming to the game, and so traffic's backed up all the way down Lumpkin, all the way down Millage, all the way to the Loop. And the police chief there at the time, great guy, was dressed in, civilian clothes. And he went back up to the car where things were happening, and he noticed this backup. He was like, "What is going on here?" And he just went ballistic, and the state patrolman came back, and he just lit into him and said, the state patrolman looked over at one of the Georgia police officers who was actually in uniform, and said, "Officer, you better get your man under control." And the officer said, "That'd be my chief, sir."
Yeah, it could get hot. For sure. My strategy of going to the first dog walk of the year is we were undefeated. And I liked walking through the crowd when we were undefeated, even though we was over. I didn't want to go to the second dog walk, you're 0-1. May not be as nice of a reception. So I tried
tomato fly overhead.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm good.
That's right. So,
well, as we kind of talk a little bit more and wind down, I want to hear more about your mark that you've made on Athens, not just your team and UGA, but you've really made a mark on the whole community. What do you think the mark that you've left is?
I don't know. I think going back to my new goal in life back in '86 of just wanting to be obedient to God, wanting to, how do you please God? Do you please God by obeying God? How do you know how to obey? Well, you get in His Word and you pray and you go to church. And so, my pursuit was to, live that type of life. I obviously would fall short quite often because of the old sin habits in my brain. And, if everybody knew everything I thought, they'd be like, a coach is not that good of a guy. But I think it's just like with the players. They learn more from watching you than listening to you. Mm. They hear what you say, but they watch what you do. And if you're consistent in your behavior, then it gives them confidence that you're real and you're legitimate. And players can sniff it out pretty quick. If you're trying to be somebody else, and I've had coaches come to me and say, "Oh, coach, I wish I could be as calm as you on the sideline," and this that, and the other. I'm like, look, that's just my demeanor. I'm from Nebraska. I'm kind of a calm guy, but you got to be who you are. And so God gave everybody different personalities, and I think the more genuine we are in our faith and genuine we are in our behavior and our relationships, people see that and are sometimes drawn to it.
It's really interesting. He has made an indelible mark, not just on Athens, but across the country. I know at the Peach Bowl, this year was honored and a extended standing ovation.
It was humbling. It was cool.
I mean, it's just bring tears to your eyes, but just the impact that's been made. And it's interesting that all Georgia, all living coaches, and lost Coach Dooley recently. He lived here, but are all in Athens.
Right.
And that's really cool to see. Coach Richt back and making the
Coach Goff, Coach Don, and myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it's a great place.
It really is. So,
when as we're finishing up, I kind of wanted to address your famous phrase, the finish the drill. What does that really mean to you, and what was your intention with it?
Finish the drill started as an off-season workout program where every drill we did had a finish line, and you had to finish the drill as strong as you started it. It was kind of a grueling off-season program, and so we were ingrained in that. And then year one, we play Tennessee at Tennessee. We're losing late. We come back and win the game in dramatic fashion, and we're in the locker room, and I'm trying to explain what had just happened, and one of the players said, "We finished the drill, coach." And I said, "That's right, we finished the drill." But finish the drill has a lot to do with sports and games and not quitting when things get tough, but it also is about life. It's about academics for those guys. It's about, when you get hit in the mouth with a sickness or whatever it may be, that, no matter how tough things get, never quit. And through God's help and strengthening, we can do that.
That's awesome.
I'll tell you one quick story. Veron Haynes, that game I was talking about at Tennessee, he caught the ball over the middle for this late touchdown. And so as I'm writing the book, he hit me up on my phone, which, by the way, I have the same number since 2001, so I could stay in contact with these players. Veron calls me, he said, "Hey, Dad." Hey, no, not "Hey, Dad." He said, "Hey, Coach." He said, "My daughter is in dance class, and she hates it, and she wants to quit." He said, "No, honey. We're the Haynes family. We don't quit. We finish the drill." So then later on, he went back. He left early to play pro ball, didn't get his degree. Well, he went back. His children were older and got his degree.
Finished the drill.
And his son grabbed him by the cap and gown, and said, "Hey, Dad, you finished the drill."
That's great.
So it's pretty cool to hear those kind of stories.
That's
Impact.
great.
That's so cool, especially to hear something that you would say as a coach for your former players to say that. And
it was really nice.
Those stories.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
I think our listeners have picked up some great nuggets. And Coach, I want to thank you for being our guest today and being part of this. And
yes, sir.
This is a show all about making the mark in life, and not just those temporal marks, but those ones that last forever, and those eternal marks. So
exactly, we want to say thank you so much, and for everyone listening, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll post a new episode every Wednesday.